there was a young woman named Emily who loved nature and enjoyed hiking. One weekend, she decided to explore a remote and eerie forest known for its unsettling reputation among the locals. As the sun began to set, Emily ventured deep into the heart of the forest, guided by the dim light of her flashlight. The tall trees seemed to lean in closer, their branches forming grotesque shapes in the darkness. The forest was eerily silent, with only the faint rustling of leaves disturbing the stillness. Emily was confident in her navigation skills, but as she wandered deeper, the trees and trails began to look unfamiliar. Panic slowly set in, and she realized she was lost. She tried retracing her steps, but the forest seemed to shift and change, making every path look the same. With her heart pounding, Emily knew she needed to find shelter for the night. She stumbled upon an abandoned cabin, its windows boarded up and surrounded by overgrown weeds. Though apprehensive, she felt it was her only chance to rest and wait for daylight. Inside, the cabin was musty and filled with cobwebs. Emily lit some candles to provide a meager source of light. As the night wore on, the forest outside seemed to come alive with strange sounds, eerie howls, distant whispers, and unsettling thumps. With each passing hour, Emily's fear intensified. She heard footsteps creaking on the cabin floor above her, but she was alone. The walls seemed to close in around her, and shadows of the trees danced menacingly in the candlelight. Just as she was about to lose hope, she noticed faint writing on a dusty old journal left on the cabin's table. The journal belonged to a previous lost traveler who had sought refuge in the same cabin. Reading through the entries, Emily learned that the forest, and those who got lost at night, never escaped its clutches. As the clock ticked on, the cabin's unsettling energy intensified. Emily tried to stay awake, fearing what might happen if she fell asleep. But exhaustion overcame her, and eventually, her eyes closed. In the middle of the night, Emily was awakened by a bone-chilling creak. A figure stood at the cabin's entrance. Could this be the lost traveler from the journal? Frozen with fear, she watched as the figure moved closer. Its eyes were hollow, and moving aggressively towards her. Summoning all her courage, Emily knew she had to escape. She fled from the cabin and ran through the forest, guided only by the moon's dim light. The figure pursued her relentlessly, its voice echoing through the trees. Just as Emily felt she couldn't go on any longer, she stumbled upon a familiar trail. Racing forward, she finally emerged from the dark forest as the first light of dawn broke through the trees. With trembling legs and a racing heart, Emily vowed never to return to that forest. The memory of that night would forever haunt her, a reminder of the eerie and inexplicable dangers that could lurk in the darkness of the unknown. The unseen follower. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, Jessica lived a seemingly ordinary life. She was a young professional, living alone in her cozy apartment. Little did she know that her life was about to take a chilling turn. It began with small and seemingly innocuous incidents. A bouquet of flowers arrived at her doorstep, without any note or indication of the sender. Emma assumed it was a simple mistake, perhaps a delivery meant for someone else. However, the following week, she received another anonymous gift, this time a box of chocolates. Puzzled but not overly concerned, Emma brushed it off as a coincidence. Yet, as the days passed, the gifts kept arriving, each time more personal and unnerving. A handwritten note would accompany the gifts, filled with compliments and expressions of admiration for Emma's beauty and grace. Unease crept into Emma's heart, and she started feeling watched. She noticed a figure lingering in the shadows whenever she returned home after work. It seemed like someone was always just out of sight, observing her every move. She began to take extra precautions, ensuring all her doors and windows were locked, and she changed the locks on her apartment door. But no matter how careful she was, the feeling of being watched persisted, like an invisible presence was always nearby. Emma confided in her friends about the strange occurrences, but they dismissed it as her imagination playing tricks on her. They assured her that it was just a harmless admirer, someone who might have a crush on her. As the weeks passed, the situation escalated. Emma started receiving unsettling emails and messages on her social media accounts from an unknown user. The messages became more intrusive and possessive, as if the sender knew her every move. The invisible stalker seemed to know personal details about Emma's life, things she had never shared publicly. Panic set in as she realized that this wasn't just a harmless crush, it was a deeply unsettling and dangerous obsession. Fear consumed Emma's daily life. She began to avoid going out and spent sleepless nights in fear of what might happen next. Her work suffered, and she lived in a constant state of anxiety. Feeling trapped and overwhelmed, Emma finally decided to seek help from the authorities. However, without concrete evidence or a direct threat, they could offer little assistance. The stalker was careful to avoid leaving traces, and their identity remained a mystery. The days turned into weeks, and Emma's life became a harrowing nightmare. The stalking continued relentlessly, always one step ahead of her attempts to escape. The line between reality and paranoia blurred, leaving her questioning her own sanity. Emma's only solace came from a support group for stalking victims. There, she found others who understood her pain and fear. Together, they offered strength and empathy, providing a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. As the story goes on, the identity of the stalker remains unknown. The unseen follower continues to haunt Emma, a chilling reminder that the line between safety and vulnerability is fragile and that the shadow of fear can lurk in the most unexpected places. There was a group of friends who loved exploring and seeking adventure in the great outdoors. One summer, they decided to embark on a thrilling camping trip to a remote and mysterious forest they had heard tales about. Little did they know that this trip would become a night they would never forget. As they hiked deep into the heart of the forest, they marveled at its beauty during the day. But as the sun set, the forest took on a whole new, sinister demeanor. The towering trees seemed to close in around them, casting long, creepy shadows on the forest floor. With their campsite set up, they sat around the crackling campfire, sharing stories and laughter to dispel the growing unease they felt. The night sky was obscured by dense tree cover, leaving the campsite shrouded in darkness. As the hours passed, they realized they had lost track of time and had no idea which direction their trail back to civilization lay. Their maps seemed useless in the darkness, and the forest had a way of distorting their sense of direction. A sense of foreboding crept over the group as strange sounds echoed through the woods, rustling leaves, distant howls, and eerie hoots. They tried to convince themselves that these were merely the normal sounds of nature, but their hearts pounded with anxiety. They decided to make a plan to stay put until morning and then retrace their steps in the light of day. But as the night wore on, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched by unseen eyes, and the once comforting campfire now seemed to provide little comfort. One of the friends noticed a faint light in the distance. Hoping for a sign of civilization, they ventured toward it, leaving the safety of their campsite. But as they approached, the light flickered and disappeared, leaving them in complete darkness. Terrified and disoriented, they tried to make their way back to the campsite, but every path they took seemed to lead them in circles. Panic set in as they realized they were lost, surrounded by the eerie unknown of the forest at night. Amidst the confusion, one of the friends felt a cold hand on their shoulder. They turned around, expecting to see one of their companions, but to their horror, there was no one there. The chilling touch sent shivers down their spine, and they let out a scream that echoed through the trees. Fueled by adrenaline, the group rushed back to the campsite, where they huddled together, fearing what might come next. Their flashlights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the trees around them. They were certain they were not alone in the forest that night. Suddenly, they heard a haunting melody carried by the wind. It was a mournful tune that seemed to resonate with their fear. The melody grew louder, and the forest seemed to come alive with an otherworldly presence. Frozen in fear, they watched as ghostly figures emerged from the darkness. The figures moved silently and gracefully, their eyes hollow and sorrowful. The friends realized they were in the presence of lost souls, spirits who had wandered the forest for eternity, seeking peace and release. Terrified and overwhelmed, the friends pleaded for mercy and forgiveness, promising to leave the forest and never return. In that moment, the eerie presence vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Exhausted and shaken, the friends decided to wait until morning and set off at first light to find their way back. They emerged from the forest with stories to tell, but they could never quite shake the feeling that something supernatural had transpired that night. From then on, they were cautious of the unknown and the allure of adventure that could lead them into the dark heart of the forest once more. The night they got lost in the eerie woods would forever serve as a chilling reminder that some places should be left untouched and that the mysteries of the night can be far more terrifying than they ever imagined. A lone traveler named Alex, an avid hiker and adventurer. One moonlit night, Alex decided to take a shortcut through a dense and foreboding forest to reach the nearby town faster. It was a path rarely traveled, and the darkness of the night seemed to swallow everything in its path. As Alex ventured deeper into the forest, the trees loomed overhead, blocking out the moon and stars, leaving only the dim glow of a flashlight to guide the way. Despite the trepidation, Alex pressed on, confident in their sense of direction and experience. As the night wore on, strange sounds filled the air, whispers in the wind, branches creaking, and unseen creatures rustling in the undergrowth. A sense of unease began to gnaw at Alex's mind, but they pushed aside the fear, determined to reach the other side of the forest. Hours passed, and the forest seemed to stretch on endlessly. What was supposed to be a shortcut became a labyrinth of confusion. The path beneath Alex's feet seemed to twist and change, leading them further into the heart of the forest rather than out of it. An unsettling chill permeated the air, and every rustle of leaves sounded like footsteps behind them. The feeling of being watched grew stronger with each passing moment. Alex's heartbeat quickened, and every fiber of their being urged them to turn back. But no matter which direction they turned, every trail looked the same. Panic set in as Alex realized they were truly lost, trapped in the haunting darkness of the forest at night. The eerie silence was interrupted only by the occasional hoot of an owl, sending shivers down their spine. As they continued to wander, they stumbled upon an old abandoned cabin, covered in ivy and showing signs of decay. It was an ominous sight, but the desperation to find shelter and escape the forest's clutches overpowered any fear. Inside, the cabin was eerie and filled with remnants of its past inhabitants. Dusty old furniture and faded photographs told a story of lives once lived. Yet, a feeling of foreboding weighed heavily on Alex's mind. As they huddled in the cabin, trying to calm their nerves, the strange sounds outside intensified. The creaking of the floorboards seemed to echo with invisible footsteps, and shadows danced ominously on the walls. In a desperate attempt to regain a sense of direction, Alex decided to climb to the cabin's attic, hoping to catch a glimpse of any recognizable landmark from the height. But what they found left them speechless, a peculiar collection of unsettling artifacts, as if someone had been trying to communicate with spirits from the other side. As the night wore on, the cabin seemed to come alive with haunting whispers and ghostly apparitions. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the spirits of the past were trying to make their presence known, demanding acknowledgement and understanding. With the first light of dawn, Alex dared to leave the cabin, determined to escape the sinister forest. They emerged from the trees, breathless and disoriented, but grateful to see the light of day once more. From that night on, Alex never spoke of the haunting experience in the lost forest. The memory of that eerie night haunted them, serving as a chilling reminder that sometimes, the unknown darkness can be far more terrifying than anything they could have imagined. And in the heart of a lonely forest at night, one can easily lose their way, not just physically, but in the depths of their own fears and uncertainties. In a small, isolated village, there was a legend about a cursed forest that stood at the edge of town. The villagers warned each other never to enter the forest, especially at night, for it was said that those who did would never return. However, one young and adventurous soul named Jake couldn't resist the allure of the unknown. He had heard the tales of the cursed forest but dismissed them as mere superstition. Ignoring the warnings, he decided to prove his bravery and ventured into the forest one moonlit night. As Jake delved deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to close in around him, forming an ominous canopy that obscured the moonlight. The silence was deafening, and the air felt heavy with an unsettling energy. At first, Jake was confident in his sense of direction, but as the night wore on, the forest twisted and turned in ways he couldn't comprehend. The trees shifted positions, and every path he took led him deeper into the darkness, away from the village. Fear began to gnaw at Jake's heart, but he refused to admit defeat. He pushed on, hoping to find a familiar landmark or a trail that would lead him back to safety. But the deeper he went, the more disoriented he became, and the forest seemed to taunt him with its ever-changing landscape. Strange sounds echoed through the trees, eerie laughter, distant whispers, and the rustling of leaves as if someone, or something, was following him. The forest came alive with unseen creatures that made the hairs stand up on the back of his neck. Exhausted and terrified, Jake stumbled upon an old, crumbling hut among the trees. Desperate for shelter, he cautiously entered the cabin, hoping to find a way to wait out the night and escape at first light. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit by the faint glow of the moon. Cobwebs adorned every corner, and a musty smell filled the air. Jake tried to find comfort in the cabin's shelter, but an overwhelming feeling of unease washed over him. As he huddled in a corner, trying to calm his nerves, strange occurrences began to unfold. Objects moved on their own, and eerie whispers seemed to emanate from the walls. Jake felt a presence in the cabin, something dark and malevolent. Terrified, he tried to leave the cabin, but the door seemed to be sealed shut. Panic consumed him as he realized he was trapped inside with whatever malevolent force lurked there. The cabin seemed to take on a life of its own, its walls closing in on him. As the night wore on, Jake's fear turned into a desperate fight for survival. He tried everything to escape, but the cabin held him captive like a sinister trap. He screamed for help, but the forest swallowed his cries, leaving him isolated and alone. With the first light of dawn, Jake finally managed to break free from the cabin's grasp. He stumbled out of the forest, disheveled and pale, the terror still etched on his face. The villagers found him on the edge of town, and from that day on, Jake was never the same. He couldn't shake the haunting memories of that cursed forest and the malevolent presence that had trapped him in the cabin. The village learned a valuable lesson that night. The cursed forest was not just a myth but a place where darkness and terror lurked, ready to ensnare those who dared to venture into its depths. And so, the legend of the cursed forest lived on, serving as a chilling reminder to all who heard it: never underestimate the power of the unknown, for the forest at night held secrets and terrors beyond imagination. Thank you again for joining us for another video. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe and comment down below and let us know what you would like to hear in the near future. See you all again soon.